All right, so are you ready for this? We're going deep on one of their most well-known parables out there,
Hmm.
the Good Samaritan. And we've got this really cool article to help us kind of guide us along.
Yeah, and I think you'll be surprised, how much depth this story actually has. It's one of those things, it gets told and retold and retold. We can miss some of the really radical elements, you know what I mean?
That's what we're here for, right? To unearth all that. So the article, reminds us this parable. It comes from the Gospel of Luke. Jesus is being questioned by an expert in Jewish law.
And it's not just like small talk, The expert asks Jesus, straight up, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? Like he's putting it all out there, a real challenge.
Right. But Jesus, being Jesus, he doesn't just answer directly. He kind of flips it right back, asks, well, what's the law say? Huh? How do you understand it?
Which of course then leads the expert to quote those two great commandments, right?
Mhm.
Love God, love your neighbor. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. But here's where it gets interesting, okay? Instead of just leaving it there, the expert tries to back out, tries to get out of any real responsibility. He asks Jesus, well, who exactly is my neighbor?
And that's the brilliance of how this parable just unfolds. It's not just about, like, being nice. It's about blowing up the definition of neighbor. Like, what does that even mean?
Okay, so set the scene for us here. Jesus starts painting this picture, right? A man is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. And we already know this is not a safe trip.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. This road, super dangerous, bandits everywhere, just waiting to ambush travelers.
Yeah.
The article, it points out that even just hearing this location would have made Jesus's listeners nervous.
So no surprise, this traveler, he gets attacked, beaten really bad, left for dead by the raid. Pretty grim stuff.
And then a priest comes along. This is someone who, theoretically he's devoted to God, to serving others. You'd think he'd be the first to stop, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
But no, he just keeps walking. And then another religious figure comes by, a Levite, and does the exact same thing.
Just walks right past.
Right past him. Now imagine, you're hearing this for the first time. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? Your expectations are totally flipped.
It's like the good guys are actually being kind of awful.
Right.
So who does show up? A Samaritan. And that detail is huge.
Huge, because back then, Samaritans and Jews, basically enemies, different religion, different ethnicity, tons of bad blood between them.
Oh yeah, tons. So the audience is thinking, oh, here's the bad guy, but then he's the only one who stalks.
The only one. And he doesn't just say a quick prayer and then take off. This Samaritan, he gets down there, bandages the man's wounds, picks him up, takes him to an inn, pays for his care.
Like the whole 9 yards. He even tells the innkeeper, hey, if it costs more, I'll cover it when I come back. That's commitment, right?
Talk about above and beyond.
So Jesus has laid it all out, right? And then he turns back to the expert with this question. Which of these three, was a neighbor to the injured man?
Mic drop. Total mic drop. The expert has to admit it was the Samaritan, the person he would least expect.
The last guy he'd ever think of.
So takeaway number one here, right? Real love can't have boundaries. Doesn't matter what group you're in, what religion, what your background is.
It's about the person, not the label.
Exactly. It's like Jesus is asking, are you really loving your neighbor or just the people who are like you? It's a question we all got to ask ourselves, I think. Where do we draw those lines, Who are we leaving out of our own circle of compassion?
That's getting pretty deep, pretty fast. And then there's this whole point about how compassion can't just be passive. You can feel bad for someone, sure, but the Samaritan, he actually did something.
He did. The priest and Levite, maybe they felt a little bad, but their actions or lack of action, that speaks volumes.
It makes you wonder, how often are we all guilty of that? Good intentions, but do we actually do anything?
It's easy to get stuck in our heads, right?
So this parable, it's like a challenge. Are we all talk, or are we willing to get our hands dirty to really help someone?
It's not always easy, but that's what it takes.
And let's not forget, Jesus is calling out the hypocrisy here, right? These religious figures, they're supposed to be examples, and yet their actions are totally the opposite of their beliefs.
It's a critique that still applies to it. We can get caught up in the looks of things, the rituals, and miss the whole point of compassion.
So where are you be messing up? Where do our actions not match up to our values?
It's a tough question. but important to think about.
It's kind of wild to think how the people back then, when they first heard this, how they would have reacted. Imagine being a Jewish person and hearing this for the first time.
Oh, absolutely. It would shaken them up for sure. Everything they thought they knew about their faith, about their enemies, like totally challenged. A Samaritan,
Yeah.
held up as the good guy, radical.
Yeah, I mean, they're taught to believe Samaritans are bad news, and here's Jesus saying, nope, this guy, he gets it.
Total role reversal, right? The article, it talks about how this forces us to look at our own prejudices, those biases we have, without even realizing it.
Because it's easy to only have compassion for people like us, right? Those who fit in our little boxes.
Oh, for sure. We get comfy with a narrow view of who deserves help, who's worthy, and this parable just explodes all that.
And that message, it's like even more relevant now, right? I mean, look how divided things are everywhere you look.
Absolutely. Social media, politics, the news, it all creates this us versus them kind of thinking.
Yeah, constantly being told that people with different opinions, different backgrounds, they're the enemy.
That's like we've forgotten we're all human in the end, Beliefs, where we come from, doesn't change that.
So that's where this parable hits hard, right? Compassion shouldn't be picky. It's got to be for everyone.
You got it. It's a call to, bridge those gaps, reach out to people we think are different, see them as neighbors, not enemies.
Which is way easier said than done, obviously. Takes effort to step outside what we're used to challenge those preconceived notions.
No doubt. But the reward, man, it's huge. When we open up, we learn more about the world, and we help create a better, more compassionate society for everyone.
Okay, so big picture stuff, we got that. But let's get practical for a sec. What does it actually look like to go and do likewise, like in our everyday lives?
For me, it starts with being aware, paying attention to what's needed around us, not just our own stuff. It's about seeing the suffering, the injustice, the inequality in our communities, in the world. It's all there.
So not just feeling bad when there's a sad news story. It's about actually looking for ways to do something.
Exactly. And that doing, it can be lots of things. Something big, like volunteering, donating to a cause you care about.
Or maybe smaller things, like just listening to a friend who's having a rough time, helping an older neighbor with groceries.
Doesn't matter the size, it's the intention, right?
Yeah.
Are you acting out of genuine care for others?
And not doing it because you expect something back in return, right?
Right. The Good Samaritan, he didn't help that guy thinking he'd get something out of it. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Just being human.
Which I think it gets to something deeper about what a good life really means. We're so focused on success, money, stuff.
Yeah, but this parable, it's like saying true fulfillment comes from something else entirely. From helping others, being part of something bigger than just ourselves.
That's a big shift, especially these days when everything's so me, me, me.
Totally. But the Samaritan, he didn't have all those things, money, power. But he truly understood what a life of purpose was about.
He saw another human being worth helping, even though he was supposed to see him as an enemy.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? For all of us. To look past the surface stuff, the differences, and see that connection we all share.
So if we really take this parable seriously, we got to check our own priorities. Are we living in a way that matches these values, this compassion, this service?
It's uncomfortable to think about, yeah, but super important if we want to truly be like the Good Samaritan,
And you know what really struck me reading that article? It was how the Samaritan, he did way more than what was expected.
Oh yeah, totally. Didn't just do the bare minimum. Cared for him, paid, even promised to come back later.
Like he was saying, I'm not just going to do the easy thing. I'm going to make sure this guy is taken care of, for real. That's some serious commitment.
Rare these days, for sure. And it makes us think, how do we help others? Do we just check the box or do we go the extra mile?
It's easy to be compassionate when it's convenient, right? Doesn't require much from us. But what about when it means sacrifice, when it pushes us out of our comfort zone?
That's the true test, isn't it? That's where real compassion shows up. And that's what the Samaritan teaches us.
He didn't let fear, or what people would think, stop him from doing the right thing. He acted out of love, even though it was risky.
Powerful message in our world today, where it's all about me first, Take care of yourself, get ahead.
This parable, it reminds us that true happiness, it comes from something deeper. It's about connection, about serving something bigger.
It's about switching from me to we, from taking to giving.
And that's a huge change in how we see things. It's realizing that we're all connected, that my well-being depends on yours too.
It's a beautiful idea, but not always easy to live by. It's like saying, we're all in this together, and by helping you, I'm also helping myself.
So how do we learn to love like that? Where do we even start?
I think it's recognizing that we're all human. Seeing that spark in everyone, no matter their background, their beliefs.
It's remembering that web of life, we're all part of it.
And then acting on that. Treating each other with kindness, respect.
Even those different from us, those we disagree with. Because love doesn't see enemies, only neighbors.
And that's the heart of it all, right? This parable. It can change our lives, change the world, if we really listen.
And act.
It also makes you think about religion, what it really means.
Oh, for sure. Like, what's true religion, really? Is it rules and rituals or something more?
The priest and the Levite, they're like that fake kind of religion, right? All about how it looks, no actual compassion. Miss the whole point.
It's like Jesus is saying there's a difference between just saying you believe something and actually living it. Don't just talk the talk. He's saying walk the walk.
Yeah. True religion, it's about actually living those values. Love, compassion, justice, every day.
And that's for everyone, religious or not, I think.
Absolutely. It's about a life that matches your values, rooted in love and helping others, something we can all aim for.
So as we keep digging into this, it's good to think about our own relationship with religion, with spirituality, what we believe.
Are we using our beliefs as an excuse to avoid helping others? Or are they pushing us to act? Are we really living what we say we believe?
Tough questions, but they get to what it means to be human, I think.
To live a life with meaning, a life that makes things better.
In the Good Samaritan, he shows us that it can be done. Even with all the bad stuff in the world, we can choose love. We can choose to act.
We can be the change.
Yeah.
And that's a message worth sharing.
Okay, so we're back, ready to wrap up our deep dive into the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, we've been talking about some pretty big ideas, haven't we? Compassion, prejudice, what it really means to love.
It's definitely gotten us thinking, for sure. But that's what's so cool about this parable, right? There's always something new to discover in it the more you think about it.
Absolutely. And today I wanted to touch on one thing that I think often gets missed.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
It's the element of risk.
Risk? It's about helping someone, right? Where's the risk in that?
Well, think about it. The Samaritan, he's traveling on that road, remember? The one that's super dangerous with all bandits. By stopping, he was putting himself in a really vulnerable position.
Ah, right. He could have become a victim himself, easily.
Exactly. He was risking his own safety, his stuff, maybe even his life, to help this guy he didn't even know.
And there's also that social risk too, right? Like what other people would think.
Totally. Samaritans and Jews, they were enemies. For all he knew, helping this Jewish guy could have gotten him in trouble with his own people.
So it's not just about being nice, it's almost like an act of defiance. Like he's going against what's expected of him.
Yeah. It's like he's saying compassion shouldn't be limited to your own group, your own tribe, whatever. The Samaritan's actions, they were a powerful statement about how love should be universal.
Wow, that really changes how I see the story. It's not just about helping someone out, it's about standing up for what's right even when it's dangerous.
Exactly. And that's something we often forget, I think, when we talk about this parable. We focus on the good feelings, but real compassion, it takes guts, it takes sacrifice sometimes.
Yeah, it's easy to be compassionate when it's safe and comfy, but what about when it costs you something? When you got to face your own fears, your own prejudices?
That's the real test, right there. That's where you see how deep your commitment is to actually loving your neighbor.
So the Samaritan, he's not just a model of compassion, he's a model of courage, too.
Absolutely. He's showing us that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. And sometimes it's a tough choice, one that asks us to go beyond what's easy, to risk something for someone else.
This is really making me think about what compassion really means, It's not just feeling sorry for someone, it's about being willing to act even when it's hard, even when it's scary.
That's the challenge this parable puts in front of us. Are we going to be like the Samaritan? Are we going to step up and do something even when it's inconvenient, even when it might cost us?
That's a powerful way to wrap things up, I think. This parable, it's not just a nice story, it's a call to action. It's telling us to live with more courage, more compassion.
And to remember that even small acts of kindness, they can make a difference, They can inspire others to do the same.
So as we finish our deep dive into the Good Samaritan, let's take that message with us, let's be inspired by that courage, and try to live our own lives in a way that shows that same kind of radical compassion.
Let's be willing to take risks, to challenge our own biases, and to make the world a little better, one good deed at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope it's given you some things to think about and maybe inspired you to go out there and be the Good Samaritan in your own way.
Until next time.